how exciting. I get to stand here and talk to you. I get to talk, and you listen, and you sit still while I give you some ideas, and I'm going to stand up here alone, so it looks like all the ideas I'm talking about are mine. And if you need to stand up and move around, if you're the kind of person who learns better through movement, or if you need to touch objects and interact with the world in a sensory way while you make meaning, I'm afraid that won't be possible. If you want to talk, or if you completely disagree with what I'm saying, or really agree, if you hear what I'm talking about and feel moved and want to connect with me, that won't be possible. So I'm going to do the talking, and you'll be listening. And well, listening is a very, very active form of engagement and participation. I've learned a lot. I've been moved. I've been connected through learning this morning, but it wasn't always the case. I'm 6 years old. I'm sitting in the classroom at my desk. And I'm sitting at my desk with a bucket next to my desk because I'm sick from anxiety every day. I'm looking at the big metal cupboard in the right-hand corner. I'm looking at the teacher, but I don't understand what she's talking about. I'm completely lost. I'm looking at the scrapes and the ink stains on my desk, and then I look out of the window. Out of the window of my classroom, I can see the playground. And in the playground, I can see a little black and white bird. It's got a long tail, and the tail is bobbing. I know this one. It's a pied wagtail. I know this one. But I was speaking the wrong language. Later, my teacher told my mum that I was either blind or stupid. But it turned out I was dyslexic. I now see dyslexia as a kind of superpower because it requires me to see how the parts fit into the whole. And when I was teaching at the University of the Arts, the lecturer without dyslexia was the odd one out. So I'm really happy for people who enjoyed school, and for children who are enjoying school now. But I want to educate for a learning that is more multisensory, more complex, that's poetic, that's emotional, in the ways that we humans, the children, experience the world. Exploring alongside children, without coercion, wandering, learning together, it's not easy. The ways we see children changes everything. We're at Little Barn Owl's Nursery and Farm School in Horsham. We're in a small room with a group of children between the ages of 3 and 5. They've been really exploring falling over. Because when they're out in the garden, they explore what their bodies can do to such an extent that they keep on falling over. And so as educators, we got together and we said, well, what about we reflect this back to them? We got a group of children together and we said, what about falling over? And for the months that follow, they do something that they call falling research. They ask a question which Spinoza, 17th century philosopher, asked, where he stated, we do not know in advance what a body can do. And these children are asking themselves, what is my body capable of? And they have explored it in so many different ways. They're thinking about propulsion, they're thinking about balance, they're thinking about connection, they're thinking about narrative, they're thinking about and using feelings. And in the process of this, we've given them drawing materials. What they've done is they've started to make graphic representations of movement. They have no problem making the conceptual leap between looking at a person moving and making a mark to represent it. And in the process, what they've done is they've created representational marks to show different movements. This is Emily's. Lots of different children did different versions, but they all have this consistent language. So this one, where you have a circle, that's spinning round and round and round and round, so you're so dizzy you fall on the ground. Everyone knows that in this group, and they do that. And the dots, that's jumping. And these ones are lines, these are roly-polies. And this one, my favourite, everyone's favourite, the long lines, run into the wall. And then we gave them torches, and they started to notice that in the dark, when they moved with these lights, they again reinforced this relationship between movement and line. And then they just became fascinated with being in the dark together. At one point, Louis puts a torch on his head and says, I'm an anglerfish. So we go together as educators and we sit down and reflect on this very carefully. And we think perhaps the children will be interested in glowing sea creatures. So here we are. We're in a room, it's slightly dark, there's a screen with a bioluminescent sea creatures documentary playing, but it's on mute. The speakers are playing Vaughan Williams' The Lark Ascending. Children are moving around in the space together. Lucas says, "This is my torch to see under the sea." Louis says, "I'm a scuba diver, this is my microscope, and this is my filming boat." Lucas says, "I found a shark, 4 sharks, a torch light-up submarine." And Laura says, "We can be glowing mermaids." Lucas, "It's a friendly shark." Neve, she's got a rolled up piece of paper, she says, "I stop. I use this to look up at the sky." Charles takes his torch, he says, "This is my shark alarm." Neve, "Guys, I just heard the sharks." Lara, "Let's go under the water." Louis, "Yes, but be careful. There's living things in there." Neve, "I'm a mermaid." And she lies on her back and she scoots herself around and around in circles singing, "Ah," in a really mermaidy way, holding her map and her torch. Lara, "I'm not a very happy mermaid." Charles, "Someone has called for help." He puts his torch to his ear. Lara, "Louis, save me." Louis, "I'm shooting poison into the sea." Neve, "I'm a mermaid without a tail." Louis, "Lara, I'll save you. I've got a breath pump." He goes into the water. He holds Lara's hand. "Come up." Lara climbs up, holding his hand. Louis says to Lara, "You have to take more than 18 breaths." Neve, she just sings a really lovely, sweet, mermaidy song. Ah. We want to pin down what children are learning. But it's more complex than that. We want to know, is it a particle or a wave? We want to know, is it a well-behaved child or a badly behaved child? But it's so much more complex than that. And today, as we know, the answer is usually, it depends. What's really remarkable here with this group of children is that they've created a space where they can make meaning together. And nobody is trying to force anybody to conform, or they're not trying to cancel out each other's otherness. Everybody can be whatever it is they want to be. Neve and Lara want to be mermaids, and Neve wants to be a sweet, floaty mermaid, and Lara wants to be a not a very happy mermaid. They need these differences to interact with each other. What they're doing is they're creating a shared space with enough consensus that they've got this narrative going, but they need to invent and they need to start bringing up new ideas together. Advertising executives pay thousands of pounds for this kind of opportunity to experiment and develop creative collaboration skills. It's very difficult to measure. Have you ever noticed how annoying children can be when you're trying to get from A to B? And when you're trying to teach them something they don't want to learn? It takes an enormous amount of energy to get them on track, to get them focused, to get them to do what you want them to do. What if we just went with it? So I've been really enjoying asking this question to people. What would you change about school? And there's been an enormous amount of repetition in the answers. A lot of people say teachers are having to do too much admin. A lot of people say they want to see the schools have more links with the community. People want a wider spectrum of subjects and they want the subjects to be integrated. And this one, my favourite, schools need to widen their parameter of what's considered normal. I think it's painful for us to divide up our life experience into chunks and into sections, because as human beings we're able to process an enormous amount of different kinds of sensory information simultaneously as a whole. Children, and we are as well, wired for relationship. So for an example, a group of children in a nursery school decide that they want to draw seeds, and they give the seeds faces, and they talk about the trees talking to each other. If an object is separate to another group of objects, they say that the object is lonely. Emotion and relationship are integral to the ways that we understand the world. But do we have to put our emotions on hold? Do we ask ourselves and our children to stop feeling so that we can start making meaning and start thinking? On this date, the 28th of October in the year 2000, I was 25. I just graduated from Central St Martin's Art School, and I got a job there as an admin assistant in the office. And I was upstairs, so I, in my lunch break, took the old lift with the big, heavy metal grill that you had to pull across, went down in the lift, out of the building, said goodbye to Gary, the security guard, and walked out onto Charing Cross Road. Walked up to a little back street behind Oxford Street. My mobile phone rang. My mum had phoned me to tell me that my brother William had died. Blinded, I veered off the pavement, making a sound so animal I didn't recognise it was coming from me. And in the months that followed, I found myself asking the same question over and over again. What is life for? I had to cut myself off from my feelings to survive. But what I found is then you cut yourself off from feelings, you cut yourself off from the good feelings, from the joy. And so I kind of tried to recover, and I realised that I had to learn some things. I had to learn to take small steps, to take risks, to realise that you can't control everything, and to try to live in the present moment. Not to think about the past, and not to worry about the future. And it turned out that for me, children are the best teachers. Children are living in the present moment, and they finding joy. I was looking around, living in London, I would see children finding joy on trying not to stand on the paving cracks, and on spinning round and round and round on a lamppost. So my search for the meaning, for me, I was looking for joy and connection, and I actually found it. So I'm not willing to compromise on advocating for children's right to joy and wonder. I started to ask children to teach me about how to play in the streets, and a 7-year participatory art project ensued. I would go to different cities, different streets, meet different children and teenagers, and they would teach me, and we would improvise playful use of public space. And with the support of galleries and festivals and all kinds of different contexts in many, many countries across the world, got the chance to develop this. And what we would do is the children and I would train professionals, we would train architects quite often to encourage them to understand how children, quite apart from being naughty in the streets, were creating connection and giving it something that it had lost. And we were also training police officers. The 3-year project we did with the South London Gallery, we trained police in Camberwell to tell the difference between antisocial behaviour and play, because they needed to learn that. And they did. It was a wonderful experience. So knowing all this about the way that children make meaning, learn, how desperate they are to continually seek learning, and how much what do children do? They're constantly looking for meaning. They ask questions all the time, and these questions could be seen as theories. They're hypothesizing, you could say. They're strong, they're powerful, they're thinking. How can we go with this energy? And why is there really only one model still of the way we do school? Why do we still teach two-seated children so much of the time? In the UK, we have a history of progressive pedagogy, and we have Susan Isaacs, who pioneered child-centred education. And it's had a really big influence on the way we teach, but the way we learn, but it hasn't influenced the way we do school at the moment, even though it's chiming in with most educational theorists. And then there's Reggio Emilia. It's a small city in northern Italy where they do a kind of education which people call socio-constructivist. It's inspired by Lev Vygotsky. So the socio bit is acknowledging that we make meaning in relationship to place and people. And constructivist means that children and all of us build on what we know. It's a very rigorous system. It uses project learning so that we don't have to separate everything up into the curriculum. We can live and explore and make meaning in this dance, this vital, connected way that we actually live our lives. And being in this way is quite unsettling for adults, for us who we're used to dividing things up, knowing things, measuring each other. But there is a safety net, the collective. Teachers work very carefully, very closely together in a non-hierarchical way with artists and pedagogues to consider very deeply the documentation of what the children are doing and saying. And they practice listening as a value. Now, listening means that you can't try to make the other into the same. We need difference. And Reggio pedagogy includes looking at what children are doing and trying to understand what they're doing by that, and thinking about how we can encourage them to develop their ideas. Stay curious. How do we make an environment that is so fascinating for children that they want to be curious, deeply, deeply curious alongside us? There's ongoing professional development, which means that teachers are seen as people who want to carry on learning. And the whole project, the education, the projects, the school, everything is seen as research. We're learning. It doesn't have to be worked out. It doesn't have to be perfect. Because we are, after all, talking about education. We're not necessarily talking about return on investment. We're talking about people. We're talking about singular people who are part of a system. I would prefer that idea to individuality. We exist and grow in relationship. So these children who are exploring in the dark, a little barn owl's nursery, they draw and they think deeply about bioluminescent sea creatures. And this is what they say. Lucas says, he draws a picture and he says, you see this squid, you see the glowing spots on this squid, they are coal. Archie, so these children are 3 and 4, says, mine's a glowing boy mermaid. You see that he glows, he's made of metal. And Louis says, the anglerfish glows because it's made of saliva. And when the fish wants it on, it's on. And when the fish doesn't want it on, it isn't on. And it's there to warn predators that if they eat it, they will die. These children of this age are hypothesizing on what makes bioluminescent sea creatures glow. Can you imagine the difference if I'd sat them down and said, these are bioluminescent sea creatures, aren't they amazing? This is how they glow. Can you remember what I said? It's a different approach. So inspired by this, we've started a small school called Wooden House in Dorking. It's Reggio inspired, and it's part of a network of a variety of different kinds of school. The Treehouse School, which is free primary school. And that one's in Oxfordshire. This is in Manchester, the Wood School. And these networks, the Reggio Emilia Institute in Stockholm is spreading this in a quiet revolution from teaching learning to schools of learning. Sightlines Initiative is supporting that change in the UK, and Reggio Children is doing it in Italy. The people of Reggio Emilia built their schools from the decimation of the Second World War. 1945, the people are in the street, having run down the street, just reclaimed it from the last Nazi fascist troop who had been shot. They marched down the street and they said they wanted a different kind of education. They wanted a different life for themselves and their children. There were some bricks left over and women took the bricks and with their bare hands they built a new school. In the 1960s, when the mayor of Reggio Emilia was asked what prompted their culture, their city to start schools, to start a child-centred pedagogy, he said, the experience of fascism has taught us that people who conform are dangerous. And we want to maintain a vision of children who can think for themselves. They started a new education from the rubble. So, what are we waiting for? Thank you.